Chapter 1. The Beginning of the Journey. My name is Mark. I'm 25 years old. Last year, I left my small hometown in Oregon and moved to Seattle, Washington. Why Seattle? Honestly, I wasn't sure at first. The city always seemed special to me. Water, hills, the Space Needle, coffee shops on every corner. I had seen it in movies, heard about the rain and the music, and one day I thought, if not now, then when? My suitcase was small, a few sweaters, jeans, my laptop, and my old guitar. The bus arrived at the central station, and the first thing I noticed was the smell of rain. The air was fresh, like after a long storm. The sky was gray, the streets shiny with water, and people moved quickly with umbrellas in their hands. I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, "This is it. My new life starts here." Chapter 2. First Impressions. Finding a place to live wasn't easy. Seattle is expensive, and I didn't have much money. After 3 days of searching, I found a small basement studio in Capitol Hill. It wasn't perfect. One window, a squeaky floor, and a kitchen barely big enough for a stove and a sink. But it was mine. On my first night there, I lay on the mattress and listened to the city. I heard footsteps from the apartment above me, a bus passing by, and the soft sound of rain against the window. I didn't feel lonely. I felt alive. The next morning, I walked around the neighborhood. There were colorful murals on the walls, little grocery stores, and coffee shops filled with people working on laptops. The city was loud and quiet at the same time. I bought a drip coffee at a small shop and sat near the window, watching people. Everyone seemed to be in a hurry, but I didn't mind. For me, everything was new. Chapter 3. The first job. I needed work. My savings would only last a month. After handing out resumes, I got a job at a coffee shop downtown. It wasn't glamorous, cleaning tables, making lattes, carrying pastries, but it was steady. The manager, Lisa, was kind. She showed me how to steam milk and said, "Don't worry, everyone learns. Just smile at people. That's the most important thing." The first week was tough. My hands shook when I tried to make cappuccinos. Customers talked fast, and sometimes I didn't understand their orders. But slowly, I got better. I learned to say, "1 second, please," and check twice before serving. People smiled back. Sometimes they even said, "Thanks, you made my day." That was enough for me. I worked mornings and afternoons. In the evenings, I explored the city. Pike Place Market, with its fish stalls and flowers. The waterfront, with ferries coming and going. Parks with tall trees and views of the mountains. I felt small, but in a good way. Chapter 4. New friends. At the coffee shop, I met James, another barista. He was my age, with long hair and an old camera always hanging around his neck. "You play guitar, right?" he asked one day when I mentioned music. "We should jam sometime." A week later, I visited his apartment. It was filled with vinyl records, books, and half-finished paintings. We played music for hours, me on guitar, him on drums. It wasn't perfect, but it was fun. Afterward, we sat on the balcony, drinking cheap beer, and looked at the city lights. "You'll get used to the rain," James said. "It never stops, but it also never really bothers you after a while." Through James, I met more people, students, artists, people working in tech. Seattle felt like a mix of everything. Some people came for work, some for dreams, some just to escape. And somehow, I felt I belonged among them. Chapter 5. The city around me. Seattle has its rhythm. Mornings are filled with people rushing to work, buses packed with commuters, coffee shops buzzing with energy. Afternoons are slower, with gray skies and drizzle. Nights can be quiet or full of music, depending on where you go. I loved walking. Sometimes I walked for hours, from Capitol Hill to Gasworks Park. From there, the city looked like a postcard, the skyline, the water, the boats. On weekends, I took the bus to Discovery Park and walked along the beach. The cold wind, the sound of waves, the smell of salt, it cleared my mind. I started taking photos with my phone. Rain on the window, lights reflected on wet streets, strangers crossing the road. It felt like the city was alive, and I was part of its story. Chapter 6. Quiet Moments. Not everything was easy. Some nights, I missed home. I missed my mom's cooking, my old friends, the familiar quiet streets of Oregon. In Seattle, everything was louder, faster, more expensive. Rent was high, groceries cost more than I expected, and sometimes my paycheck barely covered the bills. There were evenings when I sat on my bed, tired, and thought, did I make a mistake? But then I remembered why I came. I wanted change. I wanted growth. And growth doesn't come without challenges. So I kept going. I started writing in a journal, just a few sentences each night. Today it rained all day. A customer said my coffee was perfect. I walked by the bay and saw a seal. Small things, but they reminded me that progress was happening, even if I didn't always see it. Chapter 7. Struggles and Small Victories. One day, the coffee shop closed suddenly. The building's rent went up, and the owner couldn't keep it. I lost my job overnight. I panicked. Rent was due in 2 weeks, and I had no backup. I applied everywhere, restaurants, shops, offices, but no one called back. For 3 days, I barely slept. Then James introduced me to a friend who worked at a bookstore. They needed someone part-time. I went for an interview, nervous and sweaty, and somehow got the job. The bookstore was smaller and quieter than the cafe. Rows of books, the smell of paper, soft music playing in the background. I learned how to use the register, organize shelves, and recommend novels. I actually loved it. Customers weren't in a hurry. They asked about books, told me stories, and thanked me for suggestions. I felt useful. That night, I wrote in my journal, lost one job, found another. Maybe that's how life works here. Doors close, but others open. Chapter 8. Winter in Seattle. Winter came. Seattle doesn't get heavy snow often, but the air was cold and sharp. Streets glowed with Christmas lights. Cafes smelled of cinnamon and hot chocolate. At the bookstore, we sold holiday cards and children's stories. People came in with scarves and red cheeks, looking for gifts. On Christmas Eve, James invited me to his apartment. A group of us sat around, ate pizza, and exchanged small presents, socks, chocolate, a book. It wasn't my family, but it felt warm. I realized that friends can become family too, in their own way. The rain didn't stop, but I learned to love it. Rain meant cozy nights, quiet mornings, reflections on the sidewalk. It gave the city a rhythm, a softness. Chapter 9. Spring and Change. By spring, I felt different. More confident, less afraid. I knew the bus lines by heart. I had favorite spots for coffee, favorite benches in the park, favorite streets to walk. Seattle no longer felt like a stranger. One day, I met Anna. She came into the bookstore looking for poetry. We started talking, slowly at first, then more easily. She was studying architecture and loved sketching buildings. We began meeting after work, sometimes just for tea, sometimes for long walks by the water. It wasn't love at first sight. It was something gentler, friendship growing into something warmer. With her, I laughed more. With her, I felt seen. Chapter 10. 1 year later. A year passed. I was no longer the nervous guy with a small suitcase. I had a job I liked, friends who felt like family, and memories that filled my journal. On the anniversary of my arrival, I went to Gasworks Park again. The sky was cloudy, the city stood tall across the water, and the rain started to fall, soft and steady. I sat on a bench, pulled out my notebook, and wrote. 1 year ago, I came here with nothing but a dream. Today, I have a life. It's not perfect. It's not always easy, but it's mine. And for the first time, I can truly say, I am home. Sparkles, thank you for reading my story. This was my year in Seattle, a story of rain, coffee, books, music, and quiet victories.